All right.
I forgot it.
7 o'clock.
ये private chat नहीं है ये.
No, it's still 2 minutes.
I think we're live.
All right then.
Start grinning.
You see my lipstick? Should I have my lipstick?
हाँ.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, Gaurav saying that he can see you on YouTube putting on lipstick.
Well, it's intentional.
So I'll
Pre-bloopers.
start then.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this event by Champaca Bookstore with Nisha Susan, author of The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories, in conversation with Paramita Bora. I'm just going to introduce Champaca and the speakers to you, and then hand the conversation over to them. Champaca is an independent women-run bookstore, children's library, and cafe. We bring diverse stories and perspectives for our readers and in our children's library through our books and events. We have an online store that ships across India where you can find all the books on our shelves. Nisha Susan is a writer and editor. She grew up in India, Nigeria, and Oman and lives in Bangalore. She's the co-founder of two award-winning media companies, The Lady's Finger and Grist Media. She currently writes Cheap Thrills, a column on millennials, time, and obsessions for Mint Lounge. Her nonfiction is focused on culture, gender, and politics. Her fiction often explores the intimacy and strangeness that the internet has brought to India. Paramita Bora is a filmmaker, writer, and dedicated Antakshari player. She's the founder and creative director of Agents of Ishq, India's best-loved website about sex and desire. She's directed the documentaries Unlimited Girls, Partners in Crime, among others, as well as the television series Connected Hum Tum. Her fiction and nonfiction writing has been widely published, and she writes a weekly column, Paranormal Activity, in Sunday Midday. The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook and Other Stories is Nisha Susan's dazzling debut collection. The stories tap into the rich vein of love, violence, and intimacy that technology, particularly the internet, has brought to the lives of Indians over the last 2 decades. You can get yourself a copy of The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook on our online store, www.champaca.in. We ship across India. We're so happy to be hosting this event. Thank you so much for being here, Nisha and Paramita. Over to you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's very exciting. It's an exciting day because Nisha is my friend, and there can be nothing more exciting than when your friend finishes a new project. There can be nothing more scary also than having to read a book that a friend has written, because you're like, if I don't like it,
Filled with horror.
Yeah, like, what if I don't love it? What if I just like it? What if I don't like it? But luckily for me, I absolutely loved The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook. Now we're going to launch the book. Just because we are doing it online doesn't mean we are not launching it. So the launch in COVID times.
Oh,
I hope everybody's clapping in their houses.
The mask has come off.
Congratulations.
Scam.
Congratulations, Nisha.
Thank you.
So I think it's such an interesting thing that this book is being launched online, given the world that is set in, right? I think it couldn't be more appropriate at some level. And I had so many thoughts while I was reading the book that I almost don't know where to start, but I want to start everywhere at the same time, if you know what I mean. But one thing I definitely want to say about the beautiful cover, the absolutely beautiful cover, which I know that, you had liked Rohit Bhashi's work before you thought about having his picture on the cover, because you had told me about it. And I thought, how like you it is that's the cover, how like the world that the book is about it is also, which is beautiful because it's about finding beautiful things on your own as you travel the world and live a life, a certain type of life. But I also want to say frivolously that I'm so happy that the book is a Gelusil pink. because it's like an antacid for all my irritation about so many books that everybody's always telling me to read, and I'm just like, no, it's what my friend Sankalp would call a homework type of book. Like, I feel I have to read it and I'm not going to read it. Or, of course, as you know, I start complaining about the books as soon as I start them and then never finish them. But that didn't happen. And I know that many of the people who've bought the book and read it had the same experience. You can't speed read it. You just want to keep reading it. Like, it's pleasurable. There's no fight with the book. It's like The book is generous and willing to give you as much enjoyment as you want. And if I were to write a review of this book, I would title the review Unguilty Pleasures, because whoever has guilty pleasures obviously believes too much in the norm, right? But the idea that pleasure is something that you don't have to feel guilty or stingy about is what this book is totally made up of for me. But I wanted to start by asking you, like, an interesting thing that I noticed is from the first story to the last story, there is a kind of an arc about how we experience the internet, where there is a group of people who are not on the internet, but being internety, almost as if they're prefiguring the coming of the internet. And it's very like libidinal social networks in a way, which leads us to think that, that internet wouldn't have existed without life, even though now we are told that there can be no life without the internet.
You're talking about the people in the title story.
Yes,
right?
in the title story. So there are all these people who are hooking up, and then they make a map of all their sexual connections, the kind of like libidinal genealogy of a generation in a city. And then somebody says, let's make a website. And somebody was like, nobody will ever log into that website. So in a sense, it prefigures Facebook in a wonderful sort of way. But the book then ends with a story that is about great fear. In fact, the internet is a place of fear, alarm, still a kind of sexual possibility, but nevertheless, a much more fearsome place, and an aquarium where we are now inside something rather than in and out of it and all over it, swimming free as fish. And I wondered if you could talk a little bit about this arc of the time in the internet that you wrote about.
Right. So I think the internet did something for me very similar to what books did for most people, including me, that it allowed us to play out multiple lives of you make choices, right? And even when you're young, you're making those choices and you say, okay, if I make this choice, then I don't have this option, that. And then you sort of make some choices anyway. But books allow you to sort of play out multiple choices. It is the original massive multiplayer role-playing game, right? And the internet did that for me. So I grew up in Bangalore with no real sense that it was a very specific situation, that my growing up was at the cusp of liberalization, that I was growing up in a city that was about to explode. I mean, I could have grown up in Mysore or Kozhikode or any other place and my life would have been very different, but I had no sense of it. And then, sort of bumbling around, and then you get on the internet and then it was like, whoa, what? Okay. And then, oh, the possibilities and the stories that you hear from other people, the stories that you tell other people, so many lies were told. We all told so many lies and it was so enjoyable. I know someone who told me a lie for like, I don't know, 5 years or something, and I just went along because it was so entertaining, and it's not really a lie also. So to go from that place to like where it is now, of like worrying about putting anything online, right? Like I know at some point I've written semi-pornographic short stories and put it up online under my own name, and I thought that was completely okay to do. Like I was a fully grown adult and it meant nothing. And now, I mean, I think twice about putting like the street that I live in, right? And so that I didn't anticipate it. In the same way that I didn't anticipate the way Bangalore was going to change, I didn't anticipate the way internet was going to change. But I have such a sense of enjoyment of the internet even now. Like I joke about, I mean, I joke about my Malayali boy constituency because it is still a great place of play for me. Like that's something that only happens on the internet, because in my, IRL, there isn't a Malayali boy constituency that I can have this jollification with. So the internet remains a great place of play for me, but it's also sort of interlinked with everybody's fears of what's going to happen if I put my street address down.
But other than just this kind of anxieties, I think like what I sensed as I read the stories, not that you were necessarily trying to draw that arc, but as the stories changed across time, that I felt very suffused by the sense that this crazy and free playing ground, this place of great privacy in a way, the place we went in for our most private selves, and which is why I think you're saying that it's a lie, but it's not a lie, right? All the fantasies, everything. I mean, a story like Teresa also is in a way not about the internet, but about the internet, right? So I think that quality of the stories, that they are about the internet, but not just about the internet, that hide and seek feeling, which of course the internet allowed us to do with our own selves in a way, really like shapes the stories, I thought. Though by the end, it's sinister, the sinister nature of what happens online seemed to flood the stories a little bit more, I thought. But to go to your Malayali boy constituency, it was more interesting. I think that, reading the book brought me back to the first time that I read you.
Okay.
And the first time that I read anything, that I have a memory of reading anything that you wrote.
We have lost Paro. Briefly, I think. I hope. So what I will do while we wait for Paro is that perhaps I will read out the names of the winners of the poem contest. I have the list somewhere here on my phone, I think. If I could just find my phone. My phone. Any chance that we will get Paromita back so that I do not have to pretend to know what I'm doing here?
No worries, this happens all the time, so we're good. We'll just wait for her to get back.
Okay. So you know what? I just wanted to say we got some fantastic entries for our poem contest. People who don't know about it, we had a poem contest for this evening, and the theme of the contest was my first internet friend. And the only rule that we had is that everything should rhyme. This is to prevent people from being big bores. That you know what happens, right? When people are told that they must write free verse without rhymes, we immediately start becoming very deep, and then our beards start growing very long. So to avoid this problem, we thought we would pick poems which rhyme, and we got some great entries. So between Paro and me, we read all of them, and we found it a bit hard. Luckily, we have 5 prize-winning entries. So the 5 prize-winning entries will get copies of my pink book. Parmita, you are back.
I'm back after scaring everybody as usual.
Do you want to read the names of the winners? I was just saying they were great entries, and they capture a lot of interesting experiences. This thing about being who you are, but extra dose of who you are, not a mild dose, but an extra dose, a concentrated version of telling lies, of meeting people offline, online, chat rooms, all kinds of things seem to come up in the poem. So it was a bit hard to pick. So do you want to pick the final ones?
No, I want you to pick them because you're the lady of the night.
Yes, I am looking like Elvira. This is true. Okay, so the names are Ruta, that's Rhuta, Trisha, and Pritika, and Aarti, and Preeta. As you know and notice, there are only ladies writing poetry. This is a very good thing. So winners, congratulations. You will be getting your books very soon. Thank you for writing the poems. They were great.
Yeah, the poems are awesome. In fact, I thought that the poems rather mirrored the book in the sense that there were a lot of people talking about the old internet, about the rediff chat room and all of that. And then there were some who were talking about the more recent internet, but it was again more fearful, like webcam spying and trolling online. So you could see the difference in the
putting tape on the webcam, which seemed like such an old, old world solution to a new world problem. Sellotape.
Yeah. But those are not the things we thought about that much when I think we were first using the internet. But anyway, so I'm going to come quickly to your Malayali boy constituency before I get cut off by your Bengali boy constituency, I guess, when I started talking about it. So the first time that I read anything by you that I remember was an essay about Malayali men in Tehelka. And I remember how thrilled I was when I read it.
Okay.
Because I thought, oh my God, the way that we talk and the way that we understand life and make patterns, it's there in a magazine. It was a huge relief.
Right.
And then I guess I knew that you wrote the gossip column in Tehelka. And I found it very, as a devotee of Neeta's Natter in my childhood, I was delighted to discover this because, again, it had that sense of the way that we talk about seemingly frivolous things, but take them seriously. We use them as a way to understand life as much as we do literature, politics, etc. So after that, I basically subscribed to Tehelka for you. And,
This I did not know, and very good thing also.
Yeah. So I want to know more about this Malayali self that just fills the book. It's so fantastic because I know that like, when we speak also, you love to tell me examples from Malayalam films, and then of course like choice Malayalam phrases and muhavras. But there is like the book is full of Malayali characters, but it's not a book about being Malayali. And that's what I loved about it. It is and it isn't all of these things, right? These are experiences all of us relate to, but it's completely constructed from material about life in Kerala or of Malayalis not in Kerala and things that you would know. Um, why is this so always a tasty thing for you?
So I learned to read and write both languages, English and Malayalam, at the same time. My mom taught me and my brother at the same time, and so it's interlinked. The reading thing is interlinked for me. So I read in Malayalam like every day all the way till I was, I think, 10 or so, because there's this whole children's magazine culture there was. So I would wait, it would arrive every week. So I was steeped in the language in a way then that I'm not so much now. But it's also all these other things which that the language was a point of enjoyment. So there was books and magazines and comics and movies and all of that. So it was and there's like so much storytelling around all of it, right? So this happened fairly frequently to me in Kerala until I realized I'm so dumb, I need to like process this information. I would go and hang out and I would overhear two people having an intense conversation about something horrible that had happened to someone. It would be like something horrible, okay? And I would listen very carefully. Then after some time, I'd be like, who are you guys talking about? And then they'd be like, oh, that character in this serialized novel who's appearing in a magazine, okay? And then the next summer I was in Kerala, it would happen to me again, that they would be like having this extremely like racy discussion about someone who went to Bombay and then she fell in with this like bad crowd and those were lesbians and blah blah blah, and I'd be like, who? And they'd be like, oh, that character in this novel. And so the novels which appeared in magazines was something that everybody read, like everybody read it. And so for me, Malayalam was point of like extreme enjoyment. It was great. Like it was great. Later, I learned other languages. I learned Kannada in school. Then, I learned to speak it properly at work because my first office was a Kannada speaking office. Then I had that enjoyment. You didn't get it in school. That didn't really work. I didn't learn Hindi that way, despite 15 years of Hindi. When I went to Delhi and then when I went briefly for reporting to Uttar Pradesh, I was just like, okay, now I understand the joy of Hindi. So every time it gets sort of linked to having a good time, then I would get really hooked on a language. And for the longest time for me, it was Malayalam and English.
So I think that like Malayalam, life in Malayalam, let's say, appears in so many different ways, right? It's also the way that the girls are described. There's so many things that are in the language and also which make up the language in a way, the experiences. So I thought maybe if you could read an excerpt, the one about Blouse Mohan, then people would get a sense of what I'm celebrating.
Right. So yeah, Blouse Mohan is quite the character. Anyway, so okay, so the story that you're referring to is the story that Parmita is referring to is a story called The Trinity. It's about three girls in Kochi in the early 2000s, late 90s. They really fancy themselves. This is the number one thing to know. They say, I mean, the narrator says that we discovered A.R. Rahman, as in we discovered that A.R. Rahman was a good character, like soundtrack to dance to. So that's their level. And so they start competing. They start dancing when they're very young, but they start competing in college. And in college, they make a quick assessment ki, we need to do more. It's not just enough to dance. So this is about what happens when they make that decision and who they meet then. So Thiruvananthapuram is where they go for these big youth festivals where everybody in the whole state comes to compete, and it's highly competitive and like cracked. So this is about that time. The first time in Thiruvananthapuram, we knew we were taking a risk, but we were sure we could carry it off. We knew that more than anything else, what would shock the public were our bare arms. Malayalis have this strange thing about sleeveless. Sleeveless means bad girl. Usha Uttuk voice bad girl. Never mind that stomach and back and breasts and all are showing when you wear a regular sari blouse. We were used to designing our everyday clothes, and our tailors were our slaves. In return, they happily stole our patterns for their less imaginative clients. They wouldn't ever try to touch us easily or suggest that our necklines were too fast or anything. But for these new dance costumes, we had to find a brand new tailor. The only man to go to was Blouse Mohan. Blouse Mohan never spoke, never chatted with clients, he never measured. Every woman in Kochi with the courage, which a surprising number had, went to him. You stood before him, took off your dupatta if you were wearing one, moved your pallu aside if you were wearing a sari. You stood before him while he looked at your chest. When he was done, he looked at his notebook, wrote indecipherable things, and never looked at you again. Meanwhile, you explain to the top of his head, you explain the occasion, the style, the look you were trying for. You were never sure whether he had heard you even. One of his dozen assistants would then give you a date to come and pick up your blouse. And on that day, you would get the best fitting, most flattering blouse you'd ever had in your life. Courage was involved not just in letting a strange tailor stare at your breasts, it also lay in the possibility that Blouse Mohan might refuse to stitch your blouse. Or the assistant would tell you that Sar was busy, but you know that you'd been checked out and found wanting. When we went to him, we stood quietly before him. We explained our requirements in detail, one professional to another, handed over our material, sure that we wouldn't be refused. Not even Blouse Mohan would dare refuse us. And it was true. The incredible costumes that we wore in Thiruvananthapuram and after, in those 3 years that we won 30 gold medals, the costumes that people raised their eyebrows at, they were all made by Blouse Mohan.
So, like we were discussing, I felt like I knew the story of Blouse Mohan maybe from a comic I had read somewhere. And you said somebody else told you that they had heard about Blouse Mohan and what happened to Blouse Mohan afterwards. So I'm saying that, that idea of a story from a place which is not exoticized, which is not regionalized, so to say, that there is a place, and in a place there are many stories, in a sense, is the way in which, like, Malayali characters or something that happens in Kerala or in life around that space. See, somebody already wants to know about Blouse Mohan. I'm checking. Deepali Taneja is asking where in Kochi was Blouse Mohan located. See, our friend, I had once written a column titled "Wo Darzi Hai Kahan" about my tailor who does not have them. And our friend Anila told us that if you find a good darzi, you can leave your husband, but please don't leave your darzi. Yes.
So the husband angle is correct. So the writer, the famous novelist K.R. Meera read my story when it was first published, and she said, "Do you know what happened to Blouse Mohan?" So I said, "No, I mean, it's fictional character. No, just rumor, right?" She said, "No, you don't know what happened to him. He got married and his wife said, no more stitching blouses, only salwar kameez." So Deepali Taneja, sorry to disappoint you, only salwar kameez.
Well, Deepali Taneja might be asking because she thinks she's met Blouse Mohan. Or maybe Blouse Mohan has a lot of clones and one of them is somewhere in Delhi. So we will ask her later.
No, it's 100% possible.
Yeah. So, but I think, we don't often find this confidence with which you take a rumor, with which you take the things that you love and you have enjoyed and made a book, right? We have got so used to, I feel, being fed books. When people say that they have a hard time reading, and I have kind of stopped reading and only submitted myself eternally to Korean dramas now. The thing is that we're not reading, I feel, partly because we're served so many books that are not full of this confident ease of pleasure, of knowledge of your own life in a way, and interest in the world around you in a simple fashion, which allows a book to become somehow a place to consolidate ourselves, to see our experiences, right? All the books that ever seem to get talked about are always these kind of clones of what used to be the pan-Indian documentary ones, right? Like, yes, there's a roster of topics that's very important. Every time people talk about that book, they get that slightly lofty, gaze looking out. So I always think that what we want is...
Like you did many rounds of Surya Namaskar in the morning.
That extreme, like, Satvikta enters are beings, and that is how we talk about things and about places. So it is in fact not satisfying to read those books, and it's hard to connect to them, because they are not connecting somehow to a life perhaps, or anyway. So without getting into we'll get into those details later, because I'm going to ask you to read another excerpt which relates to this. But in contrast, I felt like your book was a huge relief, because it wasn't at all trying to scold me, or even subtly, right? There was no virtue signaling, there was no primness, that intense look into my face. It, like, when you're in front of a very pretty girl with high cheekbones and straight hair, and then you immediately start feeling like, oh my god, is my lipstick too red? So that the book doesn't do that to you. The book makes you feel actually quite a lot of emotions, and I found that to be just wonderful. And I want to ask how you have the confidence to do this.
It's one of those nice questions.
Out of syllabus question.
Out of syllabus also. No, so I think one is that I think I come from a household of compulsive storytellers. So my folks, I mean, we used to actually have very limited time with each other. Just once a year, we would spend a couple of months with each other. So my mother would stock up books and movies and whatever, because she wanted me to get in on the program so she could discuss them with me. And the other thing is that whoever we met, we had heavy discussions about. So as soon as, it's very sad, but as soon as guests left, my parents and I would be like, kuch, 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 kuch. So this is my household. There is like no shame. The greatest insult my mother would have for some visiting Bahu type character, new, would be, she had nothing to say. Like, and this would be like, why has this fate befallen us on a summer evening expression? And so I think I drifted correctly from there straight into many different groups of friends who all, whose greatest currency, social currency, was ridiculous stories. And so there was this sort of thing, and so it's about stories, adventures that you've had, but it's also how we consolidated our friendships with each other, right? So when some of us left, like when I left Bangalore and I was in Delhi for the first time as an adult, I had that automatic identity crisis. But when I thought about it slowly, it's also about having lived in a social context for so long, where you came with your ready-made mythology. You were this person who cannot get on the back of a motorbike without falling off on the other side. 7 different people would tell the story, and each story would be slightly different. She fell in Kormangla into a ditch which was dry. She fell in Tipsandra into a puddle. Okay, but between these things, the myth of your person is like constructed, right? And so that is how we became people. And then we also valued each other, just like my mother. My friends also valued the ability to tell a good story about ourselves or others. And when I think as you grow older, and to an extent, some stories, your capacity to have stories and adventures also shrink. I think this is my revenge on the world. Like now, when most people I know know all my stories, now I will inflict them on a whole new audience. Abhi, now guys, you've paid for it, and I will now inflict all of them on you. So this, I think, is the story of my literary confidence.
It's actually a beautiful story, because when you said that, you become a person of value through a story. You don't become a person of value through some external thing like identity or position or some horrible thing that happened to you. You become a person through small things, and that's actually the beauty of it. That's what gives us confidence in the day, that at the end of the day, that we are the person who does that, right? She's the girl who,
right.
Yeah. So I think that actually, in a sense, is a deeply political purpose of storytelling also, isn't it? That it gives all people a place to belong for some time, and not a sense of complete anonymity in a world which, yes, essentially we are anonymous, no matter how famous we may become even in the end, right? So I think that's really what is the very restorative effect of reading these stories and why it matters. But I think it's also more, isn't it? It's because it's something you do all the time, because it was in The Lady's Finger as well, that The Lady's Finger was extremely capacious, like I think voracious. The 2 words I thought when I was reading the book was, okay, voracious, is voracity a word? So whether there's veracity or not, but there's a lot of veracity, and there's a lot of velocity as well. Like there's line upon line, you're not holding anything back, you're giving metaphor upon metaphor, example upon example, laugh upon laugh, emotion upon emotion.
It connects to the same thing that I was saying, which is that if you don't quickly tell your story, your poor innocent victim bhag jayenge wo, so you'll be like, no, listen to this. So I mean, it's from the same place. It's like, when you meet kids in large families or people who've grown up in hostels, they eat very fast, na? Like they're like, the idli supply is going to run out. So this same victim supply who will listen to my story, quickly now tell them, keep them. I mean, I think it comes from the same place. In The Lady's Finger, I felt, I mean, frankly, it was bewildering to us then that it didn't already exist. Like every second person you met, every woman you met had some insane experience that they wanted to discuss. It could be that, every time you hang out in the bathroom of a pub, it becomes one little sorority there, as my friend Vijeta Kumar has written. Or it is the story of how all of us think that our fathers are very particular, which is a story that I wrote. Or some story about feeling extremely good about oneself's body and then feeling like can't tell anyone because this is the greatest shame of all, right? So that would be another story. I mean, everybody had one. So to me, it seemed like a logical thing to do, to run around asking people, do you want to write something? And then, of course, then saying, I want to write 6 more things, So, yeah.
But it is also, I mean, it is the feminist quality that you have, I think, that in some ways you don't see there as being only one narrative. There are actually literally thousands and millions of stories. And in a way, the feminist approach is to have as many stories as possible. And I think that The Lady's Finger is a great parallel to the book in a very different way. Because I think of how many people wrote on The Lady's Finger or when you were doing Yahoo Originals who went on to write whole books. Yeah. And Sabah Haji says, I have become a person of value with this character Sabah in Nisha's book. Tell everyone it was me. Happily.
It's her. Obviously, it's Sabah Haji. Who else could it be?
Yeah. But which leads me to the most boring question that everybody always asks all writers. Is this book autobiographical? They always ask you that. Like, is this book based on your life? And when I was reading it, I was thinking, of course, every book is based on your life, just not in the way that people think, right? It's based on the life that you led and the things that you saw.
Right.
And how many parts of your life does this book mirror?
So,
other than the time that you murdered a couple of people, but yeah.
Other than that time, I mean, they're just in my backyard. But okay, so I think in one of the Gerald Darrell zoo books, this is, I think, after he's established a zoo of his own in that island somewhere, and he discovers that there's one bird who has become like one greeting, I don't know what, receptionist kind of bird. Okay. Every time there is a new animal in the zoo, this bird is one like some tiny item who goes and like says hi to everyone. So I think if you like think of what animal you are, that is me, like I have general like desire to be many places. And I think that's old essayist, I think Hazlitt, he says that I would go around the world if I could leave a self behind. And that's me. Like, I would like to go to 6 parties today if I could also stay at home and just like basically do nothing. And then this becomes a way of playing out all of those stories and people that you've heard. And now it's a real thing also, this thought that now I might never see some of those people again. The people that I've met, like those things that, I'll see my friend who I saw 10 years ago, someday I'll see her again. Now there is a little tinge of anxiety that I may never see her or him again. So in a way, writing sort of plays those stories out for me, that it happened, it didn't happen, it could have happened, it happened to my friend, she wished it didn't happen. So some of my friends have very straight up like approaches to this. They say things like, put me in your next story. Okay. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I think a perfectly
Be careful what you ask for. You didn't say that.
Yeah. No. And I think it's a perfectly acceptable thing to say. Or I showed one friend a story which has, things about another friend. And he read it and he said, I like the one you wrote about me much more. And I think I think, yeah, in that sense, it's autobiographical. It's just not my autobiography necessarily.
Well, I also meant actually just like that you lived in Delhi, that the places you've lived in have filtered into your book. The worlds you've sometimes looked at as a journalist, I could see, have filtered in. So the entire life that you lead actually makes that thing that you make. So every book is autobiographical at that level, perhaps.
Absolutely. I mean, I was the girl who stood backstage and stared at all the dancers. I mean, 100%. I still am.
I don't know about that. I've seen you dancing at a few parties, Nisha. We'll discuss this later.
I mean, the real girls with costumes.
Yeah. Another thing that a lot of people have been saying in reviews and otherwise I've been seeing online, that it's such a breezy read. It's such a breezy read. And while, of course, there's a lot of breeziness, there's a lot of humor, there's a lot of fun, but I also did find each story, or many of the stories, very tightly wound. And I think that, the way in which women's interiority and women's experience of life centers each story. There are a lot of men in the story. And sometimes some stories are told in the voices of men. But you do feel that this is a book that strongly tells you the world from the perspective of women. And it's scary perhaps for some people to read because they see how not relevant men always are to what women are thinking, and how much they relate to other women, and how much they're thinking about other things. So I feel like this tight woundedness, each person there's a kind of tight balance that they're all keeping. Sometimes they're very angry, sometimes they are wondering about desire, sometimes they want something but don't want to say it. When you were writing the stories, is that something that you were thinking a lot about structuring and the way that you would structure that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tightness comes also from the fact that I write stories from beginning to end fast. And, I might go back and fix things, whatever, but I wrote the title story. I wrote The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook. I think I wrote it in an hour and a half. And that's a story that hasn't changed very much except for some tweaks and fixes. And, just before it went into the book, my editors gave me some suggestions, but more or less it's the same. There are others which I've worked much more on, but essential, the feel, the structure, everything is quite fast. And that's partly my journalist training also, to just get on with it. So I do have a sort of workman approach to writing. The others, I like to also think about, people who I'm not friends with, and see where a story would go if they were telling the story. So say the narrator or the center character in the last story of the book, which is All Girls Together, Sheila. I mean, Sheila definitely has some of me, which is of being an older person, having to manage younger women. And so, I mean, I put in all my sorrows about that into that. But I also wanted Sheila to play out from a different position of, being attached to an institution, a corporate institution, having certain sort of simple understandings of girl power, and saying, we are here to make sure women are safe. But I think the biggest transition of stepping into Sheila's place happened for me is actually in a dancing thing, which is at a party, she feels very romantic and connected to her husband and starts singing, dancing to a song from that Zoya Akhtar movie in Spain, and she's feeling like, oh, this is so romantic. And, I hate that song. Okay. I mean, I enjoyed that movie. I hate that song. But actually the biggest leap for me was to imagine being that girl who likes that song and feels those things, and being in a sort of hip-ish environment and being made fun of by younger people or more pop culture clued in people, and how that would make you feel, right? Like your romance is being taken away from you, your sense of beauty of self, like that you could be a romantic subject being taken away from you. So I think more than big politics, I think those transitions I like to work with. And I do think that in the doing of it, I become more sympathetic to that person, in a way that I wouldn't have before writing it.
I mean, Ramya Ramamurthy has just said Teresa was such an amazing story. She was a bit like Bertha Mason to the narrator's Jane Eyre, or even like Rebecca. but the story is an homage to Rebecca.
It's a straight up homage to Rebecca, which is a novel I love. I mean, I actually like Daphne du Maurier's My Cousin Rachel much more, and I highly recommend My Cousin Rachel to anybody who hasn't read it. But I also found it interesting that Daphne du Maurier seems to be currently, by my very poor statistical sample, but let's say my statistical sample indicates that this humongous famous author, who is like the equivalent of J.K. Rowling's for her time, is barely read now. And if she's read, she's only read by women, right? So I found that interesting also, because it connects, like when people are reading Teresa now, many of them are like, wow, Teresa is such an interesting, like this whole thing about being obsessed, and that whole story is so interesting. And I sometimes I tell people straight up, hey, it's an homage, right? Well, when it's some very well-read, well-educated gents, then I don't tell them. And I just enjoy this feeling they don't know this.
But to some extent, isn't that also reflective of the fact that Daphne du Maurier was a popular novelist in a way, right? She was not a literary novelist in the canon, so to speak. And how easily the popular is forgotten if we don't fold it into our experience and make work out of it, which partly Daphne du Maurier in everybody's house. When we grew up, we all read her.
It was just there. I mean, like someone would throw one Daphne du Maurier at you in the beginning of your summer holidays, and at least for 4 days you were supposed to keep quiet and read that book, So
I also feel like sometimes when people talk about how there are not enough women writers and men don't want to read women writers, and that's certainly true of the general feeling you have. Men don't pay attention to women's art and writing. Ramya has a question, but I will come back to that, Ramya, in a bit.
Yes, Ramya, I will answer that question for you.
But it feels to me also that the Daphne du Maurier reference is interesting, because it's my memory that there were a lot of women novelists. Their books got made into movies. We watched them. Men read those books. And so my favorite story about people reading your book that you told me is one that I'm going to ask you to tell people about your friend sending you a photo.
Well, actually, it was a theme of my day like 3 days ago. 2 different friends sent me pictures of their big, handsome, in one case husband, one case boyfriend, lying on a sofa, lying in bed with my pink book. And I was so pleased by this. I can't tell you how pleased. I mean, it was also very beautiful. They're both like very good looking men. Okay. One of them was like on a sofa, and one of them was like tucked under a pink blanket with my pink book and reading it. So my friends, the women, had bought these books, and then the book had somehow drifted over to the other side, and the men were reading it. And I liked this because people forget that women invented the novel, right? Women invented the novel. The novel was like seen as like a down market form, epic poetry, or whatever form that men were writing at that point was supposed to be the great thing to do. Women went to libraries, they started libraries, they borrowed libraries, they hid the books, whatever, the whole works. And then, the gigantic infrastructure around the novel becomes a thing that men are very good at somehow. And sure, but they are also very unreadable often. Or more, actually what the problem often is not that they're unreadable, it is that their reputation of the reputation of them and the reputation of their brilliance is what precedes the book, as opposed to, how women exchange books, which is just, please read it. I beg you to read it so I can discuss it with you,
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I think, you and I had that experience with The Private Life of Mrs. Sharma, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, read it, and then whoever else we caught, we would be like, you also read it. Okay. So then I think that is my understanding of how books should travel in the world. And the closest we've had with that in recent times was with Elena Ferrante, which, it just became like Pinterest for readers.
But I think that the idea of love determining what becomes valuable is a very different ethic, a very different aesthetic as well. It's a different way of being in the world, as opposed to what you're describing, that power that you already accrued us. And which also, that is why I see it as a feminist enterprise, when there is this works of love which owe a debt to pleasure in a sense, right? Like you had pleasure reading stories, and now you're repaying the debt by telling stories pleasurably to others, and that's the way that legacies of beauty are built in a way. And Laus Mohan, Daphne du Maurier, and fake Andrew Wiley are all in one book, therefore, right? So I think speaking about men who read books, I'm going to ask you to read an excerpt from a story I loved, because many of my favorite Khunnas points were in it. And it's called The Gentle Reader. And I'm just going to tell the audience that it's about a writer who has solid imposter syndrome. And though not necessarily always wasting time on the internet, is wasting it in archives and other places where we all find ways to waste time. And eventually gets into some troll wars, but also ends up at a lit fest. Many different things happen to her. And she has an encounter with a reader. So, yeah.
Okay, so this story is called The Gentle Reader. And okay. So when Sabah, who is the main character, and as I have to quickly say, is of course it is based on Sabah Haji.
That's why I asked to read this excerpt, because baad mein we don't want to get a scolding.
Okay, so at the point in this story, Sabah has arrived in the hills. This is a literary festival in the hills. And she's just generally made an ass of herself. She's very insecure. She says stupid things. She's unbearable, okay, to herself also. So then she goes away and eats a very large meal and feels very happy, and goes to sleep, and then wakes up and comes back to the festival. So if you've ever gone to a lit fest, this is one of the things that you do. You keep trying to convince yourself and other people that you're not really there. So you hide outside, you eat in the chai shop very far away, then you come back and tell people that you only discovered this chai shop. Never mind that whole town has been, having chai at the chai shop. So all of these things. So she does one of these things, and then she comes back. So this is in the evening when she comes back, when she has this meeting she has an agent called Shakuntala. And this is what happens when Sabah meets Shakuntala. The crowds were just thickening when she arrived. She settled down in a corner with an ample shawl, an equally ample Hilary mantle, and the determination to grin and bear it. In a few minutes, Shakuntala came over and introduced her young son Rishi, who had recently joined her agency. Rishi was hatta-katta, had spiky hair, and the most extraordinarily white face. It was not the kind of fairness that everyone in India aspired to, this bloodless paleness. She smiled and made polite noises at him. Shakuntala's efficient genteelness intimidated her, but the literary agent asked for no explanations for her disappearance and left her to speak to someone else in a few minutes. To her surprise, cold-faced young Rishi did not disappear immediately after introductions. He sat down beside her, began chatting, and she willed herself to not feel grateful to him. Before joining his mother's business, Rishi had worked in the country's biggest PR firm, the one that took care of Bollywood's brightest. His stories were therefore predictably full of adultery, cupidity, and sleaze, but they were told with such disinterest that he seemed more ruthless than the most determined iconoclast, the most poisonous gossip monger. She had to ask him to stop the endless supply, laughing to hide her dismay. Rishi looked at her as if he was not fooled, his serial killer eyes at half-mast. Rishi's friends came over as well. They were all young men and women with clear skin and perfect grooming. She thought with secret shame that in school, this would have been the cool group, that the kind of group that she could never have been a part of. With her mind running on these gossip girl lines, it didn't surprise her when she was offered hash brownies. Retro cool, a girl smirked. And so it ends there. She gets very stoned badly, and she starts imagining things. And then later she goes to a movie in, this used to be a thing in McLeodganj. I don't know whether it's still there. There are these vegetable shops. And then if you turn up at the right time, someone will move a basket of potatoes or cauliflowers or something. And then under that is this hatch door. And then you go down and there's a miniature perfect movie theater. So 25 seats and a screen. And then they put in some DVD of something really like random. You don't know. It could be a huge action movie or a Dalai Lama documentary or just like really anything. So anyway, so she watches a movie, then she comes out and she meets Rishi. And he says that he's going even further up in the hills to a place where annually there is a sort of congregation of hang gliding lovers. Okay, so it's a place called Billing and Beer. There's two villages. That's where this happens. Sabah woke up in a village. She was rarely pleased by this and resented sticking out like a sore thumb. But Beer was silent at dawn as they drove towards Billing. They passed a temple with a broad red ribbon tied to its top, and then a tree. Rishi gestured towards the temple. That's the Thermal Devi temple. The what? Billing is famous for its fantastic thermals, hot air rising that helps the gliders, best in the world. When you jump off Billing, you get the best thermals over the temple. The red ribbon is so that gliders can see the spot from the sky. She grinned, cheered already by the prospect of more eccentricity. And suddenly there they were in Billing, a small meadow a few kilometers high in the sky, now covered with giant butterflies in various stages of furling and unfurling. Men in goggles, she could not see any women. They were walking around in shiny lycra outfits and boots. She could hear half a dozen languages around her, thick excitement in every language. Rishi, of course, knew people. He waved to someone who showed them the best place to watch. This someone indicated to her that she should be jumping, not watching. But she wasn't listening. Human beings were leaping off high mountains. Could you ever get used to that? She imagined sticking her toes out, arching her body, leaping into the sky. Perhaps Icarus was not as stupid as she had imagined him when she was a moralizing 10-year-old. After an hour of watching, she turned round looking for Rishi, and she was as startled as she had been by the hang gliders. When had she started reading? She couldn't remember. She read in film festivals and at parties. She read in moving vehicles and in the shower with one hand sticking out holding the book dry. Why did she read? She couldn't remember. Now, this child was reading on the roof of the world when everyone around him was playing with their magnificent flying machines. In the morning, he looked less smooth than last night, but just as slack jawed, was staring almost cross eyed at a book. His mug of coffee grew cold as he read. He read slowly. He turned pages with a finger the size of a little cucumber. She couldn't take her eyes away. As she watched, her breathing slowed. The mountains disappeared around her. The world narrowed and focused on his slow reading, the way it used to when nothing in the world could get between her and a book. What was he reading? She was afraid to find out. But it didn't matter. This morning, it was possible that she would die, oxygen starved, as she surreptitiously watched his Neanderthal brow frowning at a book. After an eternity, he picked up his coffee and the book jacket swung into view. A room with a view. Who'd have guessed? Rishi continued to read. 20 minutes later, she was still standing, disoriented, when Rishi was joined by three of his friends, all roughly in the same mold. Noisily, they sank their heavy bodies and bags around him. What are you reading? Some shit, replied Rishi, carefully marking his page with a folded corner before putting it away.
It's a beautiful, beautiful part of the book and a beautiful conclusion to the story, which starts with the anxiety of being an author, and ends with the joy of books and reading and storytelling. And in fact, I think that story throws up so many of the themes we've touched on in this conversation, which is the idea that so many of books and book events often seem to favor power, importance, something pre-decided in worth, rather than discovered through the love of reading. And that very often you see these hierarchies in lit fest. You see them in film festivals as well. That, I'm always a character who adored the book or adored the film that nobody else is going to the panel of, right? So, and I always feel like, why? This is the best. That's not the best. Mm-hmm. So I think that feeling, in a way, which we are denied, also comes from all of the things that your book does, which many of those books which are given darja don't do. I often find those books are emptied of experience, emptied of language. They are made, so I don't know which reader they are imagining. But the thing that I felt reading your book, partly because of Blouse Mohan and those kinds of references and the scolding Bharatnatyam teacher, these sights and sounds and thoughts that are contemporary and around us, those are the things which turn English into a vernacular language, right? Like the vernacular of experience getting into a language makes it a vernacular language on par with all the other languages spoken in India, within which there are rich literatures. But in fact, continuously this very emptied out, like Indian food for foreigners, I always call it, which has a little bit of spice, but not enough to get you excited and abandon your racial superiority, maybe. I don't know. So I think that this story very much touched on those worlds. But I think maybe your book will smash that ceiling. I'm rooting for it to make a turn in this boring tide and help us to have more books like this. But I think that's the other thing. Books like this make other people want to write books about their own lives. And then we get to have a lot of really nice books we want to read instead of a big pile which we ought to read, right?
Right. No, 100%. I mean, I do feel that happens. It happened for me in various social circles that I was part of. I was in a writing group in Bangalore in college, and we met every Thursday for a couple of years, and most of us write in some way or the other now. And I was part of a writing group in Delhi. I was part of a group of friends in Bangalore who all wrote and all read, like, enormously. And so again, I think all of those different groups, we all read and write, and there is a sense of it having value in itself without ever necessarily getting published or that scene. But it's what it's a hobby. So I mean, which is a good thing, right? Like, where else does it work? So I'm always I always get like a tickle out of that happening. So I do writing workshops, and every writing workshop there is some amazing character who writes just the best stories, and I might never see them again, but I wonder what they're doing with that story now. But I know most probably they're just writing beautiful things all the time.
Yeah. I think these kinds of books, these kinds of stories, this kind of art, and this kind of work that you do, it's like Shah Rukh Khan, or for some people Salman Khan, which is what we want more and more of. But we're always getting Amir Khan when we end up with the lists and the fests and whatever. So I hope that the love revolution of reading and enjoying, this is why I'm a dedicated Antakshari player, because the joy of songs, the infinite joy, the endless variety, the constant supply, none of it is conjuice. There's no stinginess in the world of art when it's done like this. And I think there should be plenty, which gives us a feeling of endless possibility as well. So before we open it up for questions, you have to answer for my sake and for Ramya Ramamurthy's sake, what Radha really did at the end of Missed Call. It's going to be a spoiler for some, but we don't care because we need to know.
Yeah, I mean, you could just
if you haven't read it, close your ears.
Yeah. If you haven't read the ending of Missed Call, close your ears. So Ramya, it I don't know what you think Radha did, but Radha did do, or at least attempt to do, some horrible thing. Basically, she tried to bump off the rest of the family with some poison in the chapati. So, and it didn't work out, as you know. So that is what Radha really did. I mean, if you were feeling like shit, am I just suspecting Radha of worse things? No, it's correct. You suspected her correctly.
Actually, I'm so benign that I thought Radha had mixed the saving certificates.
No, that's even
like, that is really sad. So I guess I'm not going to figure any story with these kind of thoughts, but it's okay. So
this is a profound remark on capitalism or something. I don't know, man.
Okay.
Little Bo Peep is very happy that you have acknowledged.
I acknowledge Shama. I always acknowledge love. Just because I don't love doesn't mean that you can't love. Nisha, fangirls may only be certified if you know her. Tip Sandra puddle bike fall. Okay.
It's very bad.
No, but I didn't know about it till today. But I am nevertheless a certified fan.
I have risen above from the puddle and from the ignominy.
Are there questions or fangirling only? Fangirling is also welcome. It's certainly in short supply for ladies. So we want all of it. Please fangirl Nisha right away. I've only done it for 57 minutes. Okay, fangirling. Here to declare love for Nisha and ladies. Finger, heart, plus arrow.
Deepa Menon. Hello. Heart plus arrow back to you.
Comments can be channeled in a future story. Okay, Purva Rajaram is saying comments. God, I need reading glasses. Can be channeled in a future story. Yeah, we will definitely be screenshotting the comments.
Purva Rajaram is an archive lover. She's already archiving the comments.
Jugal Modi is asking, which character in your book are you most attracted to, male and or female?
How yeah, public में बेइज्जती ठीक है. The character from Triangle. I'm very predictable.
Which character?
The
main girl, the narrator.
Not the narrator, the bearded dude.
Oh, the dude. Okay.
The bearded dude from Triangle.
Next book कब आएगी आपकी?
Please, yaar, again, like, you know, my editor and my publisher and all are watching this show, right? Like, I can't even tell any lies.
Shortly is the answer I always give.
Shortly, Ramya Ramamurthy, shortly.
Actually, I want to ask you to name your 3 favorite stories from the book.
Ooh, okay. I really like women who forgot to invent Facebook, and I liked Trinity. Actually, it's a source of major surprise to me that people like Teresa. I too find it very okay types, and I actually like Workout of the Day, which is filled with horrible people. And I think, I also like Workout of the Day because of a particular story attached to the story, which is that when I wrote Workout of the Day, which has a super misogynist in the center of the story, I wrote it a year before Me Too, and a really smart editor that I worked with read it, and what I understood from his feedback is that he thought the character was too evil to be convincing.
What?
Yeah, I mean, this is what I understood. Okay, maybe he was saying
sweet. Gents are so sweet.
Basically, I think he was evil from the beginning to the end, and he's like, his character mein kuch development nahi ho raha hai. So how can we run it? And I feel, maybe he was saying something more literary than that, but this is what I understood. So I sort of filed it away, and then Me Too happened. Then I felt like, my God, my character is so mild-mannered and he does nothing in comparison to all the really evil people out there. But so that, I don't know, I felt like it's a story that it worked, it continues to work for me, but it's not very popular. And because it was a horrible character in the middle.
But it's like Devdas. It's like Sanjay Leela Bhansali's Devdas, because all the women are telling off everybody in it, right? At least you get told off. You're a horrible person. You are not really a nice man. All of that people are saying. So I felt a lot of shanti while reading.
Oh, in fact, that is what Anila is saying, that she wanted Sanjeev to get his comeuppance. Closure kab milega? Anila, yaar, you know closure is a myth.
इतना ही closure, इतना time में इतना ही closure मिलेगा. So Anna Lynn says, so excited to follow this Bangalore girls set of short stories. Love the women characters, especially the one in Triangle. Nobody has any questions. Everybody has opinions. I really like this.
It's good, right?
Yeah, ऐसे होना चाहिए.
Annie Lewis says, Vijeta ma'am introduced us to both of you. Thanks for being so amazing. See, Vijeta ma'am is like a military industrial complex of introducing readers to women writers. So Vijeta ma'am should have statue.
I also think, I was just telling Nisha a few days ago, having received some submissions from Vijeta ma'am's students at the Agents of Vision, that I wish I was Vijeta ma'am's student, because that would make me a better writer.
You did say that. If any of you are wondering who Vijeta ma'am is a teacher and a young writer, and she works in St. Joseph's College, Bangalore. If you have children of educatable age, please send them to her.
At last, Anita's natter type of comment has come. Ooh. I am going to remain anonymous here. I worked in Tehelka very briefly. The office was insufferable, and Nisha was the only good entity in there. Looking forward to reading this book. Yay! We have made our evening.
Susan is very sweet, but also a liar. I was also insufferable, but okay. It was nice that I was nice to you. Okay,
see,
so I will
read not good manners.
Okay.
It's bad manners to read.
Reading Nisha's book, I also want to see Paromita's writings collected in a book. Why is no publishing house doing it? Okay, little Bo Peep, let me explain all the sheep type questions here. Okay, one is that all publishing houses are wanting it, but Paromita is refusing and refusing. Okay.
No, I am not refusing anything.
Okay.
I'm a gentle reader. So.
Okay. She's saying she's a gentle reader.
Manjima, love, no filter, the most unreliable narrator ever. I was not expecting it.
Oh, fantastic.
I also love No Filter. I
Oh,
also
you
love
do
No
like No
Filter.
Filter.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Loved it. Yeah.
Very good.
I also, because,
Manjima,
I was not expecting it. Women's stories, thinking there's so many out there. What's the point of writing my own? Sorry, I felt that way. Feel that way.
Manjima, start writing right now, this minute.
Yes, please, Manjima, we are all fans of yours. So you have to write your own.
This is Manjima Bhattacharya, author of Mannequin, right? What's the
Mannequin.
subtitle? I forget. What's the subtitle, Manjima?
Women, it's about
It's about the
models.
fashion industry. It's a really cool book. Everybody should read it. Manjima Bhattacharya. It's from Zubaan books.
And actually, Manjima's going to be in conversation with Urvashi Butalia this weekend. So you should go check out the information on that and attend that talk.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anna Lynn asked, do you ever feel scared while writing women's stories, thinking there's so many out there? What is the point?
Manjima was not saying that. Anna Lynn was saying
this is very uncharacteristic also.
Manjima,
हम तो गए और confused हो गए थे. Okay, ठीक है.
I thought बारिश में Manjima थोड़ा ऐसा feel हो रही है.
Okay. Anna Lynn says, do you ever feel scared while writing women's stories, thinking there's so many out there? What's the point of writing my own? Sorry, I feel this way. Okay, I will explain this to you. So I had an ex-boyfriend who used to call it a humor ecosystem. Ki you only make the joke, then you only laugh. You only say ha 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 and feel very pleased with yourself. Okay. So if you have this approach to short story writing or novel writing or joke telling, then there is no problem. You don't care about who else has made whatever number of ant and elephant jokes, you will also make one. No problem.
Can I also respond to Anna Lynn?
What?
Can I also tell Anna Lynn one thing after you finish?
Yes, I'm done.
Yeah. I think that you feel that way because the manner in which women's stories are told to us is always the same. We only ever get one type of woman's story. She's either a hero or a victim. थप्पड़ लग रहा है या medal मिल रहा है या तो हिमालय की चोटी पे जा रहे हैं या तो plane उड़ा रहे हैं. But actually, there are as many types of stories as there are women. And I want to tell you a tiny story because I'm incorrigible and talk about myself when it's not my event also. But a few nights ago, we had a Zoom birthday party for two friends. And the screenshot that I took, the party ended up lasting 2.5 hours because we all started telling each other stories. Stories of people we'd known, strange things that had happened, weird people, all of that. Of course, other people's stories, some stories which we had not ourselves witnessed but heard from others, but were passing off like as if to say, before I was born.
100% I was there only. I was standing there.
And the screenshot that I took was one of our friends telling the story and the rest of us all like totally engrossed. I think actually not enough women's stories have been told. One type of story is not all women's stories. So you should not feel this way.
I agree. Anna Lynn, are you writing right now?
Yeah, she has left. Anna Lynn has left the building. Love the chat, says Sharda you. We also love it that you loved it. There are no more questions.
Okay.
That sounds like we were in a court case. So I'm also very happy that we have hit all the filmy marks. We got a gossipy question. Oh wait.
Cliffhanger.
ठीक है. कानून के हाथ इतने लंबे भी तो नहीं होते हैं. Aha.
Nidhi K, if this is the Nidhi K that I'm thinking of, I'm going to pinch you. Why short stories rather than a novel or anything else? I mean, it's, okay. I should just quote Parvati Sharma, who writes like phenomenal short stories. So once Parvati Sharma had turned out this beautiful collection of short stories, and immediately, like you, Nidhi K, somebody asked her this question. So then Parvati had this best answer. She said, listen, you can write a short story every week. Okay. And if it is very khatara, then you can throw it in the dustbin and write one more. And by the end of 1 year, you've written 52 short stories of varying range of whatever ambition and quality. This you cannot do with a novel. So let us write short stories and get lots of practice. This is my answer, Nidhi K. And if it is the Nidhi K that I'm thinking of, I'm messaging you straight after this.
But I really feel like this particular book of short stories is kind of novelistic in the sense that you do feel a sense of a very peopled Dickensian kind of world at some level, right? And like you have to read these stories together to get the full juice, I think.
I like that.
It's like a great album. You have to hear the songs together. Kartika VK says, Nisha, how do you know when a story has reached the end? I feel this is a coded question from a publisher saying that,
Yes.
how do you know you can meet the deadline? But answer
Yes,
this
yes.
question at a literary level.
As you know, I have, instead of meeting deadlines, had children, multiple. And so usually when I feel a sense of satisfaction on behalf of the character is when I know the story has reached an end. I know I've been told that I have very abrupt endings, but in my head it is the appropriate point to end. It's yeah, I don't know. That's really the answer. Kartika, again, I'm messaging you immediately after this.
Vijay says, love to you both. Now, please to tell me, how do I keep writing and also working and living?
Abhi to yaar, please. You are to doing it double, double, triple, triple. Continue.
Yeah. You do it by doing it, I guess. Anita wants to know, have you ever revisited any of your stories and gone, kya bakwas? Aapka writing process kya hai?
So, okay, I'll answer. Okay, so what I feel like, I think um, mine is a very indulgent gaze as I grow further and further away from when I've written it. So if I wrote it like, 10 years ago, I feel very fondly of it. It's much like an old boyfriend. As in, you haven't seen him for 10 years, then you feel like, acha, bahut acha tha. It was fine. And I think well of him. If you break up with them last year, then you're remembering various details and making notes and thinking never answer messages, right?
तो मैं देख लूंगी.
Wait. So last week's column is usually like in my head, what crap, why have I written this? Why haven't I been fired yet? All of those feelings. After some time, I start feeling a bit okay about it.
Does the story itself reach the end and say stop?
Sometimes. Sometimes.
Sabahaji is going to organize a lit fest in the hills, which we know are mountains. We have seen them and we are not very athletic characters. But we'll come with Anila. May have to bake own brownies, raw material is there. Fine, we are coming. Please organize swiftly.
I asked Sabah once how to reach her, and she said, it's very easy, 1 hour by car and 4 hours by horse. So I said, I'll see you online. Okay, so.
Arya Keel says, how do you know which short story is worth writing, that story you want to tell?
Okay, so sometimes it is because there is an actual story in my head that I want to just I want to work it out. Sometimes it's a form thing, like The Women Who Forgot to Invent Facebook. It's written in first person plural, so it's a story of a group of people. So I wanted to do a little experiment with that, and that's when I wrote that one. Sometimes it's because the last story in the book, All Girls Together, is based on something that happened, which even 3 years down the line, I cannot believe it happened, which is that an internet giant decided that the best way to secure women against revenge porn is for all of us to submit our nudes ahead of time to them, and they'll keep it safely. Now, I mean, as you're hearing me, Arya, are you not feeling like banging your head against a wall or immediately writing another story? So that sort of inspiration also exists. So then you just try to play around with it.
Vijay has delivered. I'm very happy. This is a complete masala evening. Vijay says, by the way, you are both wearing awesome clothes. That black tulle skirt in the triangle gave me lots of orgasms. Thank you.
Triangle being a short story in this collection and not something we are currently wearing. I will clarify for.
Yeah, even I for 1 second got confused, but then I remember.
Clarifying for viewers.
Yeah. Vijay, I want to say that I'm wearing the shirt that I wore in Unlimited Girls, especially for this because I felt. Jahan internet, wahan ye shirt hona chahiye. So.
Okay.
This orgasm moment, there's no more questions. We have come to the climax. So what better way could we end? Thank you, Nisha, for writing this amazing book.
Thank you.
Thank you to the publishers for publishing it. We are so happy.
Yeah.
Thank you to Rohit for this beautiful drawing that's on the cover.
So I met a woman called Sarita at a party who introduced me to my agent, Jaipriya, who introduced this idea of the book to my editors, Kartika and Ajita. And then we have this book. And there is my friend Paramita. Thanks to all ladies everywhere.
Thank you to everybody who came for the questions.
Thank you, Champaca, which is, in case you guys don't know, it's a women-owned bookstore and ships copies of books everywhere in the country.
And they have signed copies of this book. So if you haven't already ordered,
I've signed.
Go order some. Yeah. We'll be back in about 9.5 months with a new book by Nisha. So see you then. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you both so much for this lovely conversation. It was really nice to be able to host it.
Thank
you, Nirika, and everyone at Champaca for hosting us.
Yes, thank you, everybody.